All right, cool. So chapter 12, our world history in black and white. The Human Genome Project, which studied the entire makeup of the human DNA, discovered that every human is 99.9% the same, with all our differences accounting for only 0.1% of our DNA makeup, and that's on page 207. Further genetic studies show that the race has no true biology behind it. In the face of our advancing knowledge, a race emerges less as a scientific reality and more as a cultural construct. So I'm asking, why do you think we still have racism in the light of all that science?
I just think humans will be humans, you know. I mean, I just think I'm again, maybe it's, I don't want to say it's the pandemic in any way, shape, or form. It's not the pandemic, in fact. It's just made me realize in my 35 years of living, people have always been the same. People are not, I don't know, we're going to go into a debate here, but I just think people are inherently, I don't want to say greedy. Greedy is greedy is a very strong word, but people look out for number one. And in so, is what can I take from this person in order to benefit myself? I mean, history has shown us that, like in regards to, we're reading a book based on black people, where it's slavery. We'll probably go into that, into slavery and this, that, and the third. We live in a world where people take advantage of people. I am not surprised in any way, shape, or form.
Ignorance, and I think it's ignorance, and I think it's see how they say back in the day, say like it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes, in my opinion, it takes a village to cast out. Like if someone's being racist, if every person around that person does not condone it, doesn't matter what college you're, if they don't condone it, and they say like, nah, like you're an outcast, you're not welcome here. If everyone says that, it will change mindsets. I think it's just ignorance, it's mindset. We've all got a part to play, but like we've all got a part to play. And I've used an example before whereby like when I taught in certain countries like Poland and like Romania and that, where they in small towns and villages where they weren't used to seeing black people, and they were a bit like, it's just being afraid. Sometimes it's afraid of the unknown. It's being afraid of the unknown. And like when like, because I was teaching in these mini communities, these mini environments where we had to all interact. By the end of it, they wanted me to come chill at their family home. When you come back, make sure you come and see us. And they hadn't even like really fully engaged with a black person before. So it's all about that. It's all about like, just like, it's just about embracing other people's cultures. It's about increasing your knowledge and other people's cultures and behaviors. It's all of that, man. That's what I think. There's a number of factors, but I think we've got to like, I think everyone has a part to play in trying to change mindsets. If someone's got a prejudiced view or they're racist, how have they come about in that way? There's a life experience. Has something happened to them? Did they get robbed by? If it's a white man, did he get robbed by a group of black boys when he was 14? Like, what has he got? No black mates, or like has he grown up in an environment where like they never? I don't know. They didn't have anyone around them. Like, how have you come that way? Like, how have you become that way? I don't. It's just that's why. I think it's all in relation to that.
Sorry, let me just add a bit more. So like, I've often, and I probably haven't even clarified it in some way, shape, or form. And this is going to sound crazy. I mean, like 2-3 nights ago, maybe a little bit longer, it was about 12 o'clock. I had so much shit running through my mind. I had to go for a little walk and literally just clear my mind as to what I was thinking about. And even today, I was literally kind of like finishing up the book or reading up on a passage. And as to, I think essentially, why can't we all get along is, I know I've said it before as human behavior, but okay, let's look at, we've got the United States who have always been some form of power. I was going to say economic power, but let's say a power. And you've always had Russia, and they've always kind of made them, those two individuals or those two countries, at loggerheads. And all of a sudden, China's come into this equation, and in some way, shape, or form, I want to make sure I get my comparison out very well. Like, no one saw, I don't want to say no one saw China come in any way, shape, or form, but you're now not going to get a world war based on bombs being dropped on countries. Because guess what? Very similar to the streets, or like using a very simple analogy would be, if someone tried to rob me, all right, and I didn't have something, they'll be able to take it off me. But if someone tried to rob me and I raised my shirt and all of a sudden you saw a gun on my hip, you'll think twice, wouldn't you? And also, and what I'm saying is China or like some other countries have now become powerful themselves to the point now that there's a level of respect being shown. Now, I've almost kind of lost where I'm going, but what I'm saying is America were this dominant force. You've got Russia who are a dominant force. China weren't who they were 20 years ago. They've become who they are now, and they're here to stay. And moving on to or discussing Africa or the Caribbean or whatever, we just got to do the same as well. Like, I'm not talking about weapons. I know that's a part, or that form is part of the conversation. But whereas economics, I know later on in the book it talks about Malcolm X in particular talking about I think the military and physically and all that type of stuff. But people only know that hard hand. Like, if I use my own life example, I know Mason's mentioned this before. So like when I was younger, I was just a very nice kid, very nice person, and I allowed people to get away with shit. Try that shit today. Try that shit today. Just for experience, I now know. Like I just didn't want no problems. I'm like, whatever, not a big deal, blah blah. I now know through experience and through living life, people learn through the hard hand. No, it's true. It's hard, that hard hand. People understand only a firm hand. America trying to bully China. China thinking, I dare you try that shit. Same with Russia. I dare you try that shit. They can't do that.
We're talking about racism and stuff, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, refer.
Nah, what I'm saying. You might have missed my point, or I've gone a bit.
No, I've got your point, because
okay.
It's more relatable to later on in the book with the Malcolm X Garvey kind of stuff.
Yeah, you kind of skipped a few chapters there, bro. Reverting back to the question though, is why do you think we still have racism? Yeah, similar to you, Mace. But to add to what you're saying, I also think it's a lack of education, and it's systemic as well, especially in the Western world. And I just happen to be reading an additional book called Sapiens, and it talks about how. No, I'll tell a lie. I'm reading a book called Sapiens, and I'm also reading a book by James Baldwin. He's a famous African American writer, and he talks about obviously the racism that he grew up in, and he speaks of it in an eloquent way. And something that did strike a nerve when I was reading is the fact that he talks about the state and the actual country allowing the racism to preside. So he talks about, when you've got a mob, like when a mob is going to lynch someone, it's not a case of they've all just suddenly been like, okay, let's just go and do this. It's the actual, the county, it's the state that allowed them to have that mentality to say, this is okay for us to do, so we can go do it because we know there's not going to be no repercussions. So it's similar to like having a business. If whoever's at the top of the business, if you're the owner, you set the precedent of that business. So if you think being lazy is okay, everyone below you is going to think it's okay to be lazy. If you think it's good to be positive and give everyone a high five and you give everyone support, then that's going to filter down through your workforce. So it comes from the top. It comes from the top of the pyramid or the system, whatever you want to call it, however you want to define it. But it's allowed to be like this because it's built in a system to continually be racist. That's why we have systemic racism, because governments and that realistically they could stop racism in a heartbeat. Like when we just seen the killing of Floyd George and everything like that. What did the president say? Trump. He wasn't exactly against it. He wasn't really like, I'm condemning this. Do you know what I'm saying? So if you're seeing the person at the top of the pile not really giving two shits, you're going to think that's okay to do and continue to do it. So it's going to continue to flourish. But as he makes out at the end of that last excerpt that I read, racism is a cultural construct because we're not born thinking about race. Like you learn everything. You learn it from your parents and your parents before them. So these are learned behaviors. This is not something that you inherently think, oh, when you see a black person or when a black person sees the white person, you think negative connotations. You have to be taught that for you to then, in order to think like that. So I put it down to a lack of education, definitely ignorance, and it being systemic. It's part of the system that we're built into. So historical evidence proves that Africa is the birthplace and true motherland for every civilization, race, and religion. It's from the original African man and African woman that all people evolved, and that's on page 210. Would knowing this information made a difference to you at a younger age?
I'm not too sure.
I feel like I kind of know that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Well, you knew that from the get-go?
Not from the get-go, but like, not from the get. Sorry, I'm actually trying to charge my laptop. Not from the get-go, but like I knew it from I've known it from an age to like, I don't know what is the point. What's the point you're trying to make here? That if I had a bit of an inkling, then what? Then maybe I'll stick together with my community, or
I think as I guess as a more of a race, essentially, if we knew that because remember, think about it, back in the day, obviously, like we're like me and you, Mace, we're from Caribbean family background and P from a more African background, but essentially we're all from Africa.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the that wasn't the rhetoric. It was very okay. You guys are African, we're Caribbean.
Yeah.
There wasn't a unified we're all African and that's that. There wasn't that at all. It was very much like, okay, well, you lot talk funny, you lot sound funny, you lot are from Africa, and like all the jokes that used to run and all of that. So for me personally, like I didn't know that Africa was the true motherland until I got a little bit older. I was a bit more aware, but by then I was a lot more aware of what was going on around me. Whereas if we've been taught that, if we've all been taught that from a younger age, I think that would have made a difference in terms of being more unified. 100%. Me personally, anyway. But obviously, that's my experience.
So go on, Mason.
I can say, I feel like from high school, but I don't know what age I would say. Still
But
young.
even high school, I think even high school's a bit late though, because man was running certain jokes in primary school, bro.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
No, he was. Maybe not you personally. I'm not going to say you personally, but man can't say man went in primary school and the jokes weren't flying and man weren't laughing. At least.
Yeah. Early years of high school, I know there was a lot of back and forth, but deep down, like early years, I don't know when, but I know earlier primary school, I was because I went to my primary school. I went to a primary school, and to be honest, there wasn't actually. It was predominantly white. There was a few black kids, but it was mainly white. And actually, it didn't even cross my mind. It was more high school. The whole divide crossed my mind, but it crossed my mind, but it came up more. But even then, like in the back of my head, I knew that obviously we're all from the same place. Well, obviously, but I knew we're all from the same place. But at the same time, you still rep your island or continent, boy.
Yeah. What was you gonna say there, P?
No, so like in regards to pride, yeah, I understand. It would have helped to maybe have known in primary school. But as to, I think, what was your question as to why is there some form of a divide? Like, in order to create wealth, you have to divide the people.
No, I didn't ask that question. But
so, what was your question? Because I wrote something down.
No, I said that my original question was would knowing this information made a difference to you at a younger age? So knowing that the original man was an African man and African woman. Like they like the African, like the first people on the earth was from the continent of Africa. Facts. That's facts. That's scientific proof that is fact. Right? Until it gets discovered that it's not right now, like whatever day it is at this very moment in time, it's factual that the first human existence can be found from Africa.
Cool. I think, yeah, the reason why I mentioned that was because I think you were talking about the separation before this group
Yeah.
this group in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would have made a difference by way of pride. I understand that. As an adult, I now understand in order to create wealth, you need to create some form of division. You can't like see this social. I don't want to go too deep, but in order to create a socialist society, we all got to be equal. That means you have 1 million, and Mason, I have 1 million, and French has 1 million. Whereas I don't know, Mason may have a different perspective and might think to himself, you know what, I can make 10 million. Why would I want to divide my riches? You know, and hence you start creating separation amongst the people.
Do you know what? That's a good point, because there's a few more parts that I'm gonna probably skip over because I don't really think it's that necessary to really dive into it. But I will, off the back of what you just said, I'm gonna go into this part now, which is on page 227. He says, "But even if I have 100 million brothers and sisters that I'm constantly beefing with, I should always recognize their family and never trade even one of them for even an infinite amount of new Jordans." And that's on page 227. He's coming from today's perspective. After seeing generational results of slavery, do you think in today's world we would not sell out our brothers and sisters?
Today's what? Yeah, 100%. It happens every day. Yeah, definitely. And the point you referenced, I think he was making reference back to how the hell did we let Europeans come into Africa and even and take us to the Caribbean islands, to South America, to England. How did we even let that happen? And unfortunately, even back then, where there's money to be made, people are going to sell people out. Unfortunately.
No, I couldn't agree more. Still, what was
even if like say like a group of people are on the road, and like they're like, you know what, like I don't know, we're all in this together, whatever. If one man gets caught, he's not like, sorry, a few men get caught, one of them is likely to score, like, and you came into it together, and it's like, it's just law of averages, 1 or 2 people or people are gonna get caught. But if you come in together, it should be this bond, this pack. But a few men are gonna just be like, you know, I'm not doing 15. I'd rather do a 7 and get a couple man worked in. Do you get what I'm saying?
Tattletales, fucking snitches.
So I've got nothing else to add. I think you both articulated it quite well.
All right. So he goes on to mention some of the black heroes that we've had throughout history. Those included Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Toussaint Louverture, if that's how you say his name. Toussaint Louverture. And I don't know why I'm putting an accent on it, but
you probably need to. So it's like that Haitian French.
Yeah, it's Haitian French or something still. But I'm aware of who that is. I've read a bit about him. Moving on to chapter 13, the movement, breaking the shackles. I want to know what, in regards to the 2 philosophies that he talks about from Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. What philosophy do you lean towards and why?
That's a good question. If you'd asked me like maybe 3 to 5 years ago, I would have leaned more towards. So was Mr. Du Bois, was he about the 10%? The top 10?
Yeah.
I would have leaned towards.
Talented 10.
Yeah, the talented 10. I would have leaned more towards him. But you see, I don't know. In recent times, I've become a lot more immersed with what Malcolm X was about, and I've become a lot more immersed, and even with what people are saying, and even what's been going on in our society around us, and the fact that sometimes, or most times actually, and throughout history, where we've had riots in our country here, things don't stop until you stand up and you strike with the iron fist, and you say, you know what, everything burned down, or all war is war, or whatever it is. And then things change, because all this softly protest, all that does, they'll give you a little inch, so it looks like a little piece of change might be made here and there, just to give you a little something to say, you know what, your protesting's working. when you come and really bun down the place and hit them where the pockets where it really hurts, that's when you see real change. So I'm more likely to side with a Malcolm X or with a Marcus Garvey. But that being said, obviously,
but before you even get to those, because those philosophies are spurned from either the boy, or Booker T.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just
So,
I just want to focus on those two before we start talking about Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey.
Okay, I believe that coming from a Malcolm X approach is likely to get more shit done, and done quickly. But what's crazy, and done quickly, yeah, in the short term, as in get things changed in the short term. But what's crazy, or not what's crazy, but in the long term, if we're gonna, even when we look at things like the police force, yeah, we need to be breaded in and then grow within those ranks to root out and eventually cast out that systemic racism, systemic thought process that's belonged in that. I'm giving one example. The police belonged in the police for so many years, because actually we've all said shun them and never becoming a police officer because of the way they treat man. But then none of us are in that system. If we can get some people filtering in, moving up, and hopefully they ain't turn to Uncle Tommy, then we can see real change. Do you get what I'm saying? It's the same with Trump. When the point you made earlier, we said if you've got a president who is not really saying there's anything wrong with it, it almost breeds acceptance among those who are out there behaving the way they do. But if you've got people that are coming up and can root in, maybe it takes some years, but come in that level and move up, and they come from the background and they don't turn to Mr. Tommy Burns or Uncle Tom, yeah, then you have a chance long term, which is more what you're looking at this top 10 or 10% or whatever it was that Mr. Dubois. So I think that there is space and room for both. I think a Malcolm X type vision or style, short term, that is going to see bang. But then long term, because he's saying don't mix with them at all, we're going to have this separation divide. Who wants to walk all the way through? Let's try and
just not even to interrupt you, but you got to realize with Malcolm X, he also changed his perspective once he came back from America.
He did. Yeah, he did. Very true. And I'm missing that part. Okay. Yeah, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, just to kind of keep, because we're gonna move on to Malcolm X. We're gonna move on to Marcus Garvey. Like, they're very obviously prominent figures in our history. But I just want to almost go back a step before we get there and define. You kind of answered it anyway, but I just want to make sure that we I guess make sure we shining the light on the other individuals that were before them. So Booker T. Washington, that's someone who, if you're going to be talking about Malcolm X, he got his ideas and thought process essentially via Booker T. Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to make that clear, not just for you, but for people that are listening as well.
Sorry, I know you started on those things. I kept moving on, didn't I? Yeah, but yeah. Sorry.
Cool, man. What about you yourself there, P?
Yeah, I mean, it's mad because I think a lot of what I want to say kind of relates to Marcus Garvey, MLK, and Malcolm X himself.
But between those two who I just mentioned, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, what philosophy do you lean towards and why?
Oh, you know what? When you were discussing it, I was a bit lost as to kind of even what you were talking about, and it might have been a case that it didn't quite maybe sink in as to their philosophies. But as to like what Mason was saying and his answer and the integration and the integration, I don't know that references the 10%. That's the world. That's ultimately what we'd want, an ideal world, But I've lived for 35 years and I just don't, and people lived several years before me and nothing changed then. And not to say that I'm not hopeful of things changing in the future. And I do believe things can change in the future, because as we've moved on and as time has moved on, things have got better. But I just feel you're always going to have that systemic level of racism. It may be faint's not the word. It might be indirect or or what have you, but I think it's always going to be there. And I just feel people respect power, political power, and economic power. Not to go on a little further, because I'm sure you're probably going to have questions in regards to that, but that's just the way I've seen things. And I was talking about China earlier, maybe I was jumping the gun. It's a case of they've amassed economic power, and I'm sure they've amassed some political power as well, because they go hand in hand. And I don't want to again go on, because I'm sure you got questions as to that. Like, the states ain't got nothing on them, like not nothing on them, but they ain't gonna say something that's going to threaten them or make them feel uncomfortable. Likewise, Russia, they can say as much as they want. They're not gonna make Russia feel uncomfortable. But whether it's the French or whether it's the States, yes, they can make continents like Africa feel uncomfortable. Why? Because we don't have the economic or we don't have the political power. But yes, I would love to be integrated. That's ultimately where I've come up from by way of my mindset. But as time has gone on, I've understood. Hence, probably the even conflict between MLK and Martin and Malcolm X.
All right, cool. But going back to the actual question, what philosophy do you lean towards and why?
No. So the reason why I did the dance, is because I can't remember it. But I mean, what I'm saying is,
I've got it noted down. I can say it off the top of my head, but I've got it also noted down just to kind of give you some kind of help you remember, and for those listening, if you're not aware of either one of the philosophies. So Booker T's philosophy was self-help, educational, and economic progress in the wake of a white dominated society of racial discrimination. And rather than force political agendas and acceptance, Washington believed it would be better served blacks to focus on working for ourselves by training ourselves to be proficient real-world jobs by marshalling a skilled trade. He felt this self-help approach would build a demand that would over time prove blacks worthy of equal rights, whereas W.E. Du Bois' philosophy was political activism against a system to overcome injustice and equality. Du Bois believed that this was the only way for blacks to overcome, and this ability was strongly contingent on an advanced education. He also promoted the theory called the talented 10th. Now, this theory is based on assimilation and stated that the top 10% of the African-American race, the best of the best, should seek higher education through college-wide integrating with the most elite levels of society. From this experience, these elite blacks could be recognized as intellectual counterparts to whites, and thus reach their full potential in American society as brilliant men. W.E.B. Du Bois felt this form of assimilation to white and world culture could transcend black men into leaders who could uplift the entire black race through freedom fighting efforts. They could lead to a fully integrated experience. So knowing those two philosophies, which one would you more lean towards?
I would lean to, like, in me personally, I would lean more.
If you're listening, well, not if you're listening, for the listeners, just based on those two philosophies, you can have a discussion amongst yourselves. You can write in and say which ones that you would more lean towards yourselves. Go on, Pete.
You know what? I almost did the flip flop. Now, I would love to, like, as W.D. Du Bois was talking about, he was talking about being involved in politics and things of that nature, and I love that. And I was going to say I would love a mixture of the two, but you asked me to pick between one and the other. And Booker T. Washington's is also very good, because you're talking about growing your own economic power, if that makes any sense, and becoming self-reliant. But I don't want to do this history, because maybe it's the reason why I keep talking about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, because again, obviously both of them got their inspiration from those individuals there. Right? And you're gonna probably argue MLK got it from Booker T. Washington, and Malcolm X got his from Du Bois in some way, shape, or form. But
Malcolm X is from Booker T. Washington as well.
Cool. No worries. No, yeah, and I understand it, because
MLK is more from W.D. Du Bois.
Yeah. Cool. No worries. My thing is this. So, like, I know Malcolm X, he was very educated, and I think he was talking about how he wanted to become a lawyer. Then a teacher told him, I can't find the word specifically. Did I write it down? That's it. Aspirations are too high for a nigger. All right. There were the words. and then that's when he went down the form of he went into the streets, etc., etc., etc. Now, in an ideal world, yes, I would love to go hand in hand in relation to politics and being in politics in this country. I just don't think that exists. It doesn't. We're fooling ourselves.
You still didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry. That's so calm.
You can.
And do you know what? I think the other thing taken into consideration, yeah, it's like the time in which both W.D. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were making these statements or ideologies of the right way to to increase or to help the Black community. You got to remember that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, Pete, I'm gonna give you a minute for you to decide because you're not answering the question. But
no, there's a reason why.
Now let me finish now. Just to kind of give you some context as well. Booker T was like he came from being a slave and he freed himself essentially.
No, I remember the whole thing. So
whereas Du Bois, he came from like a more affluent side of life. So that's why their philosophies are so different.
Yeah.
But go on, P, answer if you can.
I want to answer just for the sake of answering, not because
it's not a trick question. It's
I know it's not. I don't believe in any of. I don't believe in either of them. If I'm being honest, I would have went with Booker T. Washington in that you're self-reliant. But like, why I didn't want to answer it is with the whole Booker T. Washington being self-reliant. We saw Black Wall Street. Oh, they're making money. Boom, drop some bombs. With the whole political thing becoming woven in society, yes, I think you can become woven in society to a point. There's a cap.
Yeah, definitely. I think. See, I agree with what you're saying, but like, see, with the whole Black Wall Street thing, which he goes on to mention as well. Yes, we before that actually started, we wouldn't have known that was going to happen, that it was going to get burned down. So you had to have had an optimistic mindset to believe that you can do it, and they did, and they proved it, and it was very successful. Obviously, up until 11 years that it was up and running, then obviously it got burned down for the obvious reasons. But I personally, to answer the question as well, I would have sided with the Booker T philosophy. And the reason why is because, I'm heavily invested in self-development and doing for self. But at the same time, being aware that W.E.B. Du Bois' philosophy has some credit to it in regards to being political, because you need to be able to, as Mace rightly said, you need to be inside the system to be able to change the system as well. But he goes on, Chris Freeman or both authors go on further down the line to say, maybe I'm jumping the gun here slightly, but basically to be able to unite both philosophies and use both parts unite both of the philosophies and join as one, essentially, because they both have great parts and they both have things that you can obviously benefit as a Black community overall. And moving on, if no one else has got anything else to say on that one.
I don't think so. It depends on what you've got.
Just one other thing, just in relation to W.E.B. Du Bois' theory in the top 10, in the 10 percentile, getting in and then change it from within and then raising levels of the other 90% or whatever. When you take into consideration and context the time period he was trying to do this, and if you look at today, what you tend to have today is you will have people who essentially make it or have made it and forget about the rest, and that was
that's the Black bourgeois. The Black bourgeois. That's what I think Marcus Garvey talks about. I remember I read the book of Marcus Garvey's his speeches, and I wasn't aware at the time of W.E. Du Bois, but he speaks of him in a harsh manner in terms of what he stood for and the fact that they had like the upper class Black bourgeois, where they would go on to mingle amongst the whites in those levels, not truly be respected, but because they're being almost put above with the majority of blacks, they think that they're now not part of the black class or black culture or black race, essentially, and that they're above them. But those white people that are allowing them into those circles still don't respect them as equals. They're just more like, we're going to appease you and allow you to be amongst us, but we don't respect you how we respect ourselves, like I respect our others that are in the same position. So that's partly why I was a bit more, I would more lean towards Booker T's side of things, of being self-determined. So if you're not going to respect us, you like, again, going back to the Black Wall Street, we'll make our own. We'll prove it. We'll prove, not to say we have to prove it to you, but we'll prove it to ourselves that we can make an economy that is self-sustained and live life nice and just as positive and, I guess, beneficial, etc., etc., in our own environment, which they did. Because within Black Wall Street, it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at that time, and it's never been done since. But basically, the black dollar would circulate the community from 96 to about 1,000 times before it left the black community. Whereas now, we're in a society where nowadays the black dollar or black pound doesn't stay in our community any longer than 6 hours. So just to kind of give you context of how successful the Black Wall Street, well, it was coined the Black Wall Street. It wasn't actually called Black Wall Street, but it was just like the nickname for it. That's how powerful economically we was in that time and that space.